Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. If you're a new viewer, I'm Troy. I'm the creative behind Fox and Oak Designs, based here in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. I'm a fiber artist and a classical musician based here. And if you're an old friend, welcome back. It's been a while. I've got lots to talk about today, but without further ado, let's get into the podcast proper. If you've been following the Instagram page, you've already seen a sneak peek of this here last week. And if you've seen the thumbnail, you've seen me holding this. I have finished my Entwined Queen Shawl. So this is by Julia Decker. And this was a lot of fun to knit. And it's beautiful. Yeah, so I showed it off at Knit Night there the other day and got some lovely compliments from it by our friend Simone and of course Joanne and Kim and Betsy. So this is a brioche shawl, if you're unfamiliar with this. This is like a cabled brioche. It's a two-color brioche, obviously, and it was a lot of fun to work on. As I mentioned in a previous podcast, it's fun because it's one row of work and then basically 3 rows of rest. So you only have to really work on one row at a time. So for me, it's once I got into the groove of it, with the exception of the row of work, the 3 rows of rest were really easy for me to watch TV at. So it was nice when I got down to the bottom here of the shawl. So this shawl's construction is you start here at the very tippy top with a garter tab cast on, and then you're working back and forth, adding more stitches as you go. So the last row had something like 500, 600 stitches on it. So I made this out of Malabrigo sock and Malabrigo Ultimate socks in the colors Frank Ochre is the yellow. And then you can see the blue better here in the background. The blue, which is kind of like a tonally turquoisey peacocky blue, this one's called Wales Road. And this is in the Ultimate sock. That's a superwash wool. It blocked wonderfully. There's such a lovely amount of drape to it, despite the fact that I use quite small needles on this pattern. I think it called for a 3.5 millimeter, which is a US size 4 if you prefer US sizes. And it made this beautifully drapey fabric. Yeah, I'm really, really pleased with how this turned out. I highly recommend this pattern. It was really, really well written. The only problem I had with it was me not reading it. Because towards the end of the shawl, I got to a point where I thought I was doing the final repeat. So I was, 4 rows away from finishing that repeat, and then realized I didn't count my repeats properly. So I still had 1 full repeat to do. And I kind of got frustrated and put it aside, but that's because I didn't read the pattern, not because Julia didn't write it out well, because it's so well written out. So there's written instructions, which is what I followed for the very beginning and for the first couple repeats of it. And then it also includes chart, which then I followed for the rest of it. Because once I figured out what I was doing and I could identify the chart symbols with what I'm supposed to be doing, it made it easy. And she also color coded the cabling in here. So all the cables that you see in that was all color coded. So I didn't even have to look directly at the symbol to determine which one was which. I could just see which one was red or which one was pink, or well, pink and blue is what the 2 colors were. And that was really, really great. And it looks like I have a little end to redarn in here because it's sticking out. But yeah, no ends to shame, other than that one that just needs a little bit of a trim. There is, I liked to joke that there's a mistake here in the shawl, because I did make a mistake. I made a lot of mistakes, actually. And I fixed all but a few of them as I went along. One of them, well, no, actually, I'm not going to tell you where that mistake is. I'm just going to hold it up in a place where you can see the mistake if you know what you're looking for, which you can see it right now. And you tell me if you found the mistake and comment down below. This is a beautiful shawl. It's going to be something that I'm going to be putting on a store, I think, because I don't wear shawls like this. I'm probably going to be making this available on my Etsy store that I just opened. More on that later. While I'm doing the job hunt I don't mind a little bit of supplemental income coming into my shop. So this is the Entwined Queen Shawl by Julia Decker. I used a 3.5mm needle, which was just my, I believe it was my first Knit Picks needle that I ever had. So I ended up halfway through having to sand the tips of my needles because I have worn enough of the finish off that I felt like I needed to do that. It was starting to catch on the yarn. But once I sanded that with 600 grit sandpaper, it was all good. When I remembered, I used just a dollar store, like I think it was a Unique brand, a cable needle, just a cheap aluminum needle to do the cables. Nothing fancy. Yeah, I really enjoyed working on this. I've done a tutorial on one of my previous episodes of how I repaired certain things in here without having to just rip back. So if you have questions about how to repair brioche work like this, feel free to go look at that video, and I'll put an iCard up, or I will figure out how to do an iCard, or I'll just put it in the description. It'll be in the description regardless, but if I can figure it out how to do the iCard, I will put an iCard up here. So the next finish object that I have for you today, it's kind of a work in progress still technically, because I am currently working on a couple of hats for my cousin Amanda, and she came back to the island because she lives in Alberta. She came to the island and happened to be here when the Fiber Festival was happening. So she came down and she bought a couple tickets just to go because she has some friends who are knitters. And I believe they watched the podcast. Hi. And she came down to buy some wool. So she ended up going to the Fiber Festival and picking up some stuff. So this is one of the hats that I have done for her. And this is made in Green Gables alpaca in the color winter green. And then I've got some worsted weight Kiviot here. This was available at the Belfast Mini Mills table for a very, well, like it was unreasonably cheap, to be quite frank, but a very reasonable price that Amanda snatched up a couple of balls of it. So that way I could make some hats for her. Since she lives in Alberta and Calgary, it gets very cold there in Alberta. So she wanted something that would keep her warm while she's walking Murray, her dog. She bought enough yarn for me to do 2 of these, I'm pretty sure. I'm currently working on the second one, and this is why it's a work in progress. So I wanted to make sure that I was using only these 2 yarns, the Kiviot and the alpaca yarns. But the problem with both of these fibers is that they like to relax and they don't have a lot of elasticity left. So the Kiviot has more elasticity than the alpaca, but we're talking like on a scale of 1 to 100, Kiviot's got 10. Alpaca's got like 0. So the challenge that I had with this hat and have with this hat is that over time, the fibers left as is would continue to stretch and be loose. So what I attempted to do in this hat to alleviate that is to just make the hat smaller than I normally do. So typically when I'm making a colorwork hat like this for an adult that has a noggin the size of mine, typically I'm casting on about 110 to 116 stitches, sometimes up to 120 on a 5mm needle to get the size of hat that I need. This I've cast on only 96 stitches. I used a 4mm needle for the brim as well as the first section here, a 4mm needle here, and then I used a 4.5mm for the top, 96 stitches. So the idea is that I want the hat to be small so that way when it relaxes and stretches, it doesn't stretch too much, right? That has mostly worked. So it's a smaller hat than I would have anticipated, but it's a smaller hat than it would be otherwise, is how I should put it. But it did end up being bigger than I anticipated. So like it fits, and it will fit Amanda, and it will likely fit Charles. And it like fits nicely, but it doesn't have the kind of like grip, I'm going to call it, like the negative ease that is in a hat that stretches around your head. It doesn't have that same like feeling of that elasticity, like trying to get back to where it wants to sit. It just kind of it's stretching a little bit to sit onto my head. And feels glorious. So that was a problem that I foresaw, even with the smaller. So I went deep into my old stash of stuff from my old store that I had, Knits and Notes, for those of you who have who have known me for 6 or 7 years. I had a little store, and one of the little things that I had was some like a few like odds and ends of interesting different knickknacks, right? Before Fleece and Harmony really got into cocoa knits and all of that, which they've got all those really cool knickknacks now and all those gadgets. So one of the things that I had was elastic thread from Clover. So this is what's left of my little spool of elastic thread. So it's just a little spool of thread that is made of nylon, and it's quite fine. It's quite fine. It's thread, but it has quite a bit of elasticity to it. So what I did is I put this on the floor so that way I could get as much stretch from me working with it as possible without stretching it too far. So that way it wants to relax back into its form. And I mix that one strand here in the brim. So it's really hard to find it. But throughout the brim, you can see this elastic thread throughout the brim. And I'm hoping that that little bit of elastic thread is enough to make sure that the brim still wants to return back to its state even after the rest of the hat has loosened up. So that's what I've done. I have been able to find this again on Amazon, but even going to the Clover's website, I can't find this on their website. So I don't know if they even make this anymore. There are other options that are available that are made from like a thicker elastic thread. But like when I say thicker, like it's basically they've just wrapped like one of those elastic bands that's in underwear, like that kind of banding. They've taken a thread of that and then they like wrapped yarn, like they wrapped string around it so that way it could stretch. So it's quite a bit thicker. It's basically the thickness of like a fingering weight, whereas I wanted something really fine so that way you can't see it in the main product. I know HA Kid has that. I'm sure Unique has something similar. I think Loops and Threads by Michaels / Joann's. I think that might just be a Michaels brand. They have something similar to that thicker stuff, but I can't find anything like this except for going onto Amazon, which could just be people buying from old stock. As I mentioned, it's not on Clover's website anymore. I love this stuff, and I'm glad I was able to find it because it was able to alleviate some of my worries about this fiber. As I said, this is a work in progress. I have, I think, enough fiber to do 2 hats. I know I have enough Kiviot. So I'm currently working on the second. Ooh, you don't need to be in there. So I've been working on it here. So the construction of this hat, which is one of the things, this is the work in progress that I'm working on, is that it's a brim that the way the hat sits is that it's always turned up. And then we've got a layer of 100% Kiviot here right around, acting as like a band around your ears. So that way that stays really warm. And then we got color work on the top. The colors that we chose was based on what was available there at the Fiber Festival that fit in with Amanda's preferential palette, and what could work. Because a lot of the colors that were left there were like beautiful colors, don't get me wrong, beautiful colors. But because of this having a bit of like a heather texture, most of the colors were either just natural or they were like a darker color. Like this was the lightest green that was available. So we had some limitations of choice. And this is what we decided because Amanda wanted something that was in the green or blue palette. And this was the lightest one because the main color of the Kiviot was quite dark. And I didn't want to do two dark colors here. So I'll bring it up to the screen so you can see how that worked out. So at a far glance, it kind of looks quite dark, but once you get up close to it, it's got like a really, really like subtle design in it. I kind of like it. That's the design that I've got going here, and I will be making this available on my website. But what I wanted to do is do a turn row, so that way it turns. But the thing is that like I only know how to do a turn row from right side to, like, wrong side to right side, which then gives you this, I'll just turn it inside out here, but it gives you a really neat edge, like right there, that little edge. And what I want is for that edge to be visible when you turn it this way. So I ripped out this edge a few different times because my plan was to have like this kind of work all the way up. But just no matter which way I redid the last like few rows, because this turn is like you do a row of knits, a row of purls, a row of knits, you got your bump, that's your turn point, or sorry, rounds. And no matter how I did that function, I couldn't get it to look the way that I wanted it to, with me having this all being right side work. So I tried doing like a little turn to make that work. Didn't. I'm currently working on the second one. And this one, I'm going to have that neat edge. But the way that I'm achieving that is I'm working purl side rows on the outside of the hat. So on the second version of this hat, this area is all going to be purl stitches, and then it's going to be moving into like a couple rows before the actual pattern starts, going into stockinette stitch again and going into the color work. And I think, and I know that's going to make a much neater edge here because that edge is already apparent there. That's where this wants to turn, and I've got that lovely, lovely edge there. This hat, I'm cheating a little bit because I did use a little bit more than half of the alpaca that I had for this hat, and that's because I did the turn with the alpaca, and I didn't do as much work with the kiviot here because I was thinking, oh, the kiviot's going to be really warm, it's going to be too hot at times. I want to make sure that I have enough kiviot for everything else. So I thought that I had more alpaca than I did kiviot, but because of how the pattern works out, it does not look like it would use more alpaca than kiviot, but this, as in its current iteration here, uses considerably more alpaca than kiviot. So I'm just cheating a few rows from the alpaca so that way I can just use more kiviot, because I haven't even broken into the second 50-gram ball that I have, compared to me working through the alpaca. So I've got about 30 grams left, might be closer to 25. I've got about an ounce, we'll say, of this left, and it should be enough to be able to finish the rest of this hat. The rest of this hat with this pattern is what I mean. Should be enough. So I'm not too worried. And if it isn't, then I will cheat the height of the hat a little bit. So that way it utilizes a little bit less than it did. Both of these fibers, lovely to work with as I throw it over the floor. Both of the fibers were lovely to work with. Kiviot, you probably won't be able to get it from Belfast anymore since they likely won't be making it ever again. But in the meantime, one of the companies that we were working with there in Manitoba. Now I don't know if it's either or. I'll put it on the screen because it's along my homestead that's in Manitoba. So Kiviot Inc. is in Alberta. So Kiviot Inc. is a company that makes Kiviot yarn, and they have a number of different types of yarn that they're making from Kiviot. It is an Indigenous owned company, and I highly recommend that you buy their fiber, because some of the fiber is stuff that I've worked on, and their quality of fiber that they have for their Kiviot yarns is beautiful. This summer, I did some processing work to help them along a little bit because they don't have the fiber separator that Belfast makes, or they don't have an equivalent machine. So they've been picking the guard hairs out by hand. And I was doing some work for them so that way they could get ready for the various fiber festivals that were coming up in the fall. And a lot of the fiber that they sent me was quite nice. So hi, Kiwi, if you see this. So I highly recommend you go and check that company out. I want you to keep in mind that Kiviot is an extraordinarily expensive fiber, and Belfast Mini Mills has been underpricing it quite quite a lot. So don't be too shocked when you see that a ball of yarn costs $200, because that is the true value of Kiviat. The only reason why Belfast was able to provide that fiber to customers at a much lower price is because towards the end of the store, we didn't buy any of that fiber. We were doing processing for other Kiviat manufacturers and keeping a portion of the fiber as payment for that processing. Keep in mind when you go to their website, the prices are higher than you may expect if you're used to Belfast's Kiviat prices, but it is well worth it. It is well worth it. A little goes a long way. They have a couple of fingering weights, and I think they have a lace weight. It might be out of stock right now. That if you just hold a lace weight with a worsted weight or a DK weight to make your Aran weight or your worsted weight. So because Kiviat is 8 times warmer than wool, if you hold that double with a different wool, even a 10% variation of Kiviat into regular wool will actually double the warmth of the wool. So if you go and purchase a one of the skeins of fingering weight or ideally lace weight when they have it available, and hold that double with something else, you will make a ridiculously warm garment. And if you just want to have something that's 100% Kiviat, if you go with a lace weight and do a really lacy pattern, you will have a wonderfully warm item. If you make an item like this, unless you live somewhere very, very, very cold, you won't be able to wear it because it's so warm. Kiviat reflects the heat back at you. So Amanda's probably only going to be wearing this for maybe a couple weeks in the wintertime, because otherwise she will die of heat. So this is what I've been working on for the last couple weeks, I guess it's a month here now. Not only these two things, I've been working on a few other things. One of the other things that I've been working on is I'm just working on some crochet. I just want something that is relatively mindless, so that way when I'm sitting watching TV or like trying to relax or like recharge is probably the better word, I'm not focusing too hard on the things that I'm doing. I've kind of been in a bit of a rut with my knitting. So other than like finishing the shawl, which turned out beautifully, the hat I'm really happy with, the second hat I'm happy with, and a couple other projects that I will continue working on. I just kind of haven't really had the mojo to knit these past, I'm going to say, like these past 6 weeks. The mojo to knit has been gone. So I've been trying to fill up that need to keep my hands from being just idle. I've been trying to keep up with that by doing some crochet. So I wanted something that would be, simple enough that I can not really have to worry too much about like remembering patterns. Something that's simple, but not something that's really boring, which is kind of like the problem I have when coming with simple, like doing simple patterns, is that I get bored quite easily. So I have been obsessed with color pooling for, I don't know. Maybe obsessed is too strong of a word. I have been very interested in color pooling since I found out it was a thing back when I first started knitting. Because I wasn't a very strong crocheter, I wasn't able to get it to work ever. Because like finding out what your magic number is, which you have to do that for every yarn with every hook, and sometimes you have to change your hooks to get the effect that you want. There's a lot of like setup work that's needed to be done to get that to work. When I had the time, I didn't have the energy. And then when I had the energy, I didn't have the time. So now that I've got the time and some of the the anxious energy that I need to do something with my hands, but not wanting to knit, I decided to pick it up and try color pooling. So my first thought is I wanted to, of course, make a blanket, and acrylic, cheap way to make a blanket that's easy care. And so I picked up this one because I kind of just like looked at a video, and the video is like, oh, well, if you pick a variegated yarn that has really long color changes, then you can do a granny stitch instead of the moss stitch to stretch it out so that way you can still make your thing. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just pick anything that I like and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It was not fine. So I picked up this. This is Loops and Threads Soft Classic. It's a 100% acrylic yarn. It's $5 a ball for 4 ounces, full 4 ounces. Yeah, for 4 ounces, like $5. And when I bought it, it was actually, it was a weekend where all yarn was 30% off. So I bought a ball of this to try doing a little bit of color pooling. So as I was doing some of the work to like make this work, I realized that like the color changes in this is far too long. So this is an ombre. It's not really even a self-striping sort of thing. So I just kind of started a corner to corner blanket, finished the ball, went and I got another few balls while it was on sale there again. I had 4 balls total. So just making a corner to corner blanket, which if you're not familiar with corner to corner crochet, I'll put a link down in the description of how to do corner to corner. It's a really easy way to do like a really simple pattern. If you want to do like grid work where you're working, like making a picture using pixels, or if you're wanted to make if you had a cross stitch that you wanted to do a blanket of that didn't have 45 different colors of thread, you could use that as the basis for corner to corner. You just start at one corner and work your way. So this, I was just working corner to corner. Since this has long strands of the same color, like it would just make a diagonal striped blanket that has thick stripes on one corner, on opposing corners, and then really thin stripes there in the center. So I thought that was going to be fine. So I get through the first 2 balls, and then about a third of the way through the third, I got bored. I was bored. I didn't want to do it anymore. And then I realized in order for me to make a blanket that is the size that I wanted, because I just wanted like a throw for the couch, I would need to buy considerably more yarn. So I put it on the back burner and waited until there was another yarn sale, which this past weekend there was actually, at time of recording, I'm pretty sure it's still going on right now, but I purchased it earlier this weekend. And it was buy 2, get 1 free. So I went and I bought a few more balls. So now I have a total of 10 of these balls in the same color dye line. And what I ended up doing is ripping out the work that I had done on the other ones because I decided to do something that I've been wanting to do instead. I also, before I move away from color pooling, I will mention that I did end up buying a new ball for color pooling. If I can get that figured out, I'll do a video on it. But because I have 4 of these balls, and then I bought the other 6, I have 10 of these balls, I just started working on like a texture sampler Afghan. So I've been getting those ads on Facebook. I'm sure that a lot of you have as well on Facebook and on Instagram for that Amy's Club, I think, or Annie's Club, where you sign up for a subscription service. They send you balls of yarn, and then over the course of the year, they send you patterns as well for you to do a blanket made from squares. So I just wanted to find something similar to that, and I ended up finding, I have my notes here, and I ended up finding one called the 2020 Travelling Afghan, and it was organized by Alexandra Tavel by 2 of Wands. She is a designer. She's a fiber artist and designer that is based in New York City. She is mostly a knitter based on her website, which you can find her website down below, and as well as the like main page, the splash page for the Travelling Afghan, the 2020 Travelling Afghan that I'm currently working on down there. And she actually partnered with Lion Brand to make this fiber. To make this Afghan. And as well as she partnered with, I think, 49 different fiber artists and designers around the world to make 2 different versions of this blanket. So there's a knit version and a crochet version. I'm working on the crochet version. So Alexandra, she knit and crocheted the first block of both blankets. And then she sent the block to the next designer for them to then design their block and attach it to the first block, and so on and so forth until the entire blanket was finished. So I'm not attaching as I go in, which I might regret this later, but I want to make sure that everything's going to fit together after I block it instead of just working at it. Because the nature of a project like this, which is really cool, the idea that this is a collaboration of, like this blanket that I'm working on is a collaboration of 25 different artists, that each of them designed their own thing. And then the Afghan itself, the titular Afghan, traveled around the world to all these different parts, that each of these blocks in this Afghan is made by that artist. It's a really cool concept. Unfortunately, the issue with that is because each artist has their own tension, each block is written for that artist's tension. So I noticed that as I was working here, that some of my blocks, regardless of what my tension is, are bigger and smaller. And that is partially because of their gauge and my gauge. And in order for it to work the way that it's kind of laid out, is that you'd have to do a gauge swatch of every single pattern as you go. Which if you really want to do that, go right ahead. But I just want to work on the project. And just when I finish one block, I can move on to another block. So I have gone through some of the blocks here. Okay, so I've actually completed 5 of the blocks, and I'm working on a 6th block. I'm not doing them directly in order. I'm skipping as I feel, and I'll come back to it later. So I've started with the first block in the pattern. So this one is by Alexander Tavel, and this is like a basket weave sort of dealie. So as you can see, I'm holding it upside down. As you can see, because of the yarn that I'm using, I'm getting these great big blocks of color, which is great for scarves, things like that. And this will be fine too, because all the blocks will be the same color, and I can just mix and match as I see fit. And I will be like rotating them to see however I want to, which is the other reason why I don't want to put them together as I go, because like I'm going to lay it out and I'm going to rotate blocks like this that don't really have that don't have a true orientation. So that way I can just figure what orientation works best and then kind of like pin it in place. So that way when I sew it up later, I can sew it. So I've done the first one. So this one is by Alexander Tavel. I've moved on and I finished the second one. So I've just been using the same ball, moving through the colors. So this one is like a granny square. I haven't darned in any of my ends, obviously. So that's the actual right side of the granny square. So I haven't learned anything new techniques as of yet, but I have been working on the different things. So this one is by Cecilia Losada of Mama DIY, and this one, she's based in Spain. So the Afghan went to Spain, went to the UK, it went to Canada, the United States, and I haven't gone through the entire list, so I haven't seen all the places yet, and I haven't looked at all the patterns yet. So this is the second square, and you might notice that the squares are not perfectly the same size. Like this one's pretty close, but when I block this square, it's not going to stretch as much as this square. So I've decided as I'm going along, just working on the squares, and if I need to add more to the smaller squares, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add, I'm not going to subtract. I'm going to add a border based on this pattern all the way all along, because like that little like ridged border there, I don't know how well you can see that. That little ridged border there, I really like how that looks. And because it has that really neat top of single crochet edging there, when it comes time for me to sew the blanket together, it's going to make it really clean if I sew it along those lines. So blocks like this that don't have an edging, I'm going to be doing a little bit of an edging there, just so that way it's easier for me to sew together. And for some blocks that are considerably smaller than others, I will be updating that. So that's the first and second one. So the third one is by Wilma Westenberg and of Wilmade, and she's based in the Netherlands. And this one is really, really cute. I really like it. She called this one a tulip stitch. And we just got some cluster stitches, some double crochets, and different things in there. So I've been working and just joining the appropriate color at the same time based on whatever skein I have available that ends with the color that starts with the same color that I just ended with. So this is the third square, and that's where the first ball ended. And then I joined the second ball. So then I moved on and going through, like seeing these different stitches and seeing how much more or less they eat up the yarn is really interesting, because I was able to get almost 3 full squares out of the first ball. In fact, it's really just one of the second last, like this tan color edging that's right there, since I started from the center and worked my way out, this tan, that's where I change colors. That's where I change balls, rather. So I moved on to the four square. This one is by Lindsay Noons, and she's based in the UK, and she is of Lottie and Albert is her design company. And this one's a really fun texture. This is done with just front posts and back posts in different orders, so you're getting like this diagonal effect to it, and it's making like a really interesting textured stitch. Just like shining it off in like the Windows light here, so that way you can see the texture working forward. So again, this is worked across side to side, so I'm getting some stripes on here, so how this is oriented will differ. And this is the first block that I really started worrying about what the size is going to be like, because not only is like one of the edges, it's quite rippled, like none of this is blocked yet, so that might work out when I block it, but this one, when I line up the edges here, there, when I line up the edges, there, it's quite a bit shorter than here, by almost 2 full edgings. So what I'm thinking is that I'm just, for smaller ones like this, I'm just going to go around and do a single crochet edging. If I need to do more, I will do like that kind of edging, like around, so that way I've got that, like that nice little ridge, that like little line that was apparent in the second stitch there by Cecilia. So I'm going to add that on there to kind of like sturdify, I don't know, to add a little bit more structure, so that way I have something to sew together, as opposed to trying to figure out how I'm going to sew like my double crochets and my chain 3s from the sides of different patterns. And this one is my next one. This one is number 6, I believe. Yes, this one's number 6, and this one is from Lee Satori from Coco Crochet. And this is where I realized truly that I'm really going to have to like fudge some of them bigger and smaller. So while the pattern is all written for the same yarn and for the same size hook, because of the different stitching techniques and the tensions, they end up so much bigger or smaller. So I modified this to make it smaller, and it is, once it's finished being blocked, to flatten everything out, like it is much, much bigger. Like all that brown edging is extra. It is much, much bigger, even before blocking, than some of the other blocks. Like this is a fairly big block. Yeah, and while I'm not looking for gauge right now, because doing a gauge swatch for everything is a little tedious, I find, it's just very interesting to know that, like, because of, I should show you the front side, because this crocheter has a much tighter gauge clearly compared to this one, while this block is so much bigger than this one here, I didn't change this pattern at all. I reduced the last couple edging stitches here to make it work. So the last, one of the things I was supposed to do here to finish off this, so it was after doing like my corners, I was supposed to go around and do a row of double crochets, and then another, do a round of single crochets and then a round of double crochets. I didn't do that round of double crochets. I ended up just doing a round of single crochets and cleaning up my edges. I modified the corners so that way they had the same kind of edges the other ones had here, to make this block smaller, because it is already bigger than my other blocks. So this one it's supposed to be 15 rounds. There's only 14 rounds in this. It's not a criticism of the pattern. It's just an interesting quirk of how this was written, because everyone's gauge is a little bit different. I found that I was like working really tight to try to get this smaller, to the point that like my hands were starting to feel like a little tired, because I was pulling things so tight to get it as small as possible without modifying the pattern, and I still ended up having to modify the pattern. But it's really cute. I really like the plays of the back post double half crochets here, as well as the front post double crochets, to create that raised like petal look. It's really neat. It's really, really plush. And it's, as I mentioned before, it's interesting to see how much more different stitches use this, because as I mentioned, these 3 squares was 1 ball plus a little bit from the second ball. I finished this square and I had to join, I had to join another ball here, my third ball, to my fifth square. So I got almost 3 out of the first ball, and I didn't even get 2 out of the second ball, simply because these 2 stitches are quite a bit like plushier. I'm also like trying out different joining techniques. So here I just, I left them long. Where is it? Here I left them long. I did not knot them. So what I'm going to be doing is that when I block this, I will block it and then knot it and then weave in my ends later. But this one here, I did the magic knot. So it's a way that you do 2 knots in your yarn. So you join your ends by knotting them in opposite directions, and then you pull them tight, and then you pull them tight again. And that causes the knot to get tighter and tighter and tighter if it gets pulled. So I've done that, and you're supposed to be able to trim like really, really close to that knot, and it makes it invisible. I don't know how well that's going to work with this yarn. But I'm keeping track of what yarn, or like what ends I'm doing, keeping track of what blocks have what ends in them. So that way here, after a couple of washes, I will report back to everyone on how these different joins hold up after being put through the wash. Because this is an easy care yarn. You're supposed to be able to wash and dry it. I plan on washing and drying it. So I've done 5 squares. I'm currently working on the 6th square. And this one, it's just a, I can't remember what stitch this is called. It's just a textured stitch using single crochets and double crochets. This is the first one where I have actually modified the entire pattern to make this work for my tension. This, compared to the very first one, the basket weave one, there's actually a difference of, I believe, 3 chain, which doesn't sound like a big of a difference, but the equivalent of 3 chains is the equivalent of that far between my 2 fingers here. There's that much missing in length from this compared to the first one. So what I ended up doing is just chaining a couple more onto this chain, the starting chain, to continue the repeat. It's a 2-stitch repeat, and just to continue making this a little bit bigger. So that way, when it comes time for me to finish it, I will just have to do 1, maybe 2 rounds of single crochets around it to make the 10-inch by 10-inch block. Will my blocks be 10 inches? No, they'll probably be 12 at this point, which frees me up to make a fewer blocked blanket than what the pattern calls for, because the pattern's 25 blocks. I could potentially get away with doing 24 and do a 6x4 blanket, so it's a long blanket that will fit on the couch as opposed to a big square Afghan. But yeah, so I'm just modifying things as I go along. If you go to the page, you can actually go click on the pictures, so that way you go to those artists' blog spaces to see like their process and learn more about them. But as part of it, like, you are actually seeing this Afghan grow, because as it's moving, it's not that these designers are just making a square and then sending them all and getting it all sewn together. No, it's designer 1. So Alexandra made the square, and then she sent the square. And there's no mention on anything stating this, but I would imagine she probably also sent the yarn of the appropriate dye lot along with it to the next artist who had it for a couple of weeks. And so they work through it, and they actually join as they go. So it's a lot of fun. I'm liking the stitches here. So some of the stitches, like this one, doesn't tickle my fancy in how it works up, because it's just it's like the equivalent of a seed stitch basically in knitting. It's just alternating single crochets and double crochets, but it makes a cool texture. And this was just me crocheting, having my morning coffee, which I take like an hour and a half to have my morning coffee. So this isn't me doing 15 minutes work. This is like an hour and a half of me crocheting. So the critique of the yarn that I have, it feels the way that you'd expect it to feel. So it's not as plasticky feeling as like a Bernat Super Value, but it's not wool. It's not wool. But that being said, it is soft. It will be warm, and because I'm planning on putting it on a couch that has a cat that's probably going to be sleeping on it all the time, when I want to wash it, I don't have to worry about like taking a full day to, soak it in the bathtub and then roll it up in the bathtub and then stand on it so I can get as much water out of it on it, and then make sure that I am utilizing my towels to make it so that way I'm not using all fresh towels to draw as much water out of this as I can. I'm using slightly dirty towels that have I've already used but are dry. Like a lot less planning. I can just chuck this into the dryer. I'm pretty excited about it. It's been a long time since I've worked with a lot of acrylic, and like I have been working with a lot of acrylic lately because of the hats that I've been making and with this blanket. I've kind of, like, I know I've mentioned it before that I want to make this like an equal opportunity podcast, but like I've given a lot of harsh criticism to acrylic. Uh, I'm not super keen on like the environmental effects it still has. But if you are in a space where you are unable to commit, 20, 30, sometimes $40 to a ball of yarn to make a big project like a blanket, and you want something that's easy care, or you're going to give it to a parent with a young child, or a young adult who hasn't worked out how to do their laundry just yet, I think it's a great substitute. It's warm. The only problem is that it's not moisture wicking, so like it will make you sweat kind of warm. So given the qualities, as long as you make the right projects for this fiber, I think you'll have a great time. This stuff is squeaky compared to wool. And what I mean by squeaky is that, like, if you're working with plastic needles, or something that has a varnish that's kind of plasticky, like it's going to be quite grippy and it'll actually squeak. Where wool doesn't tend to do that unless you're working really, really tight. So just be wary of that. I'm pretty sensitive to sound, so I hear the squeaks. But it's coming along. I'm quite enjoying this. Like the fact that like this is a kind of like work at your own pace sort of thing, and it changes a little bit every so time. So like, and it feels really achievable because it's broken down into a bunch of different like little sections, as opposed to the last blanket that I made, which was Amanda's blanket there 2 years ago. The same Amanda. I made the sage colored blanket, which is basically this winter green color. Made that for her wedding a couple years ago, and now I'm making her a couple hats. She's definitely on the knit list. Yeah, that blanket was, you do like the throw first, and then you pick up the edge stitches, and then you do that big border, which, I mean, sure, doing a corner is like, all right, you did a thing. But like on the two long sides, those corners took a really long time to get to. But anyway, I think I've spoken enough about this. So as I mentioned, this is Loops and Threads Soft Classic, cheap $5 ball of yarn, Canadian. So in the United States, it's probably $3. And it feels like a pretty good workhorse yarn. It's not scratchy. I don't mind touching it to my face. I probably wouldn't make like a sweater out of it for me, because I would sweat too much in it. But if you're looking to make like a baby pullover or something like that, that's something that the kid is going to grow into, because this is going to last a while, and you want to make sure that you don't fall into fast fashion, especially with a fiber like this where it's basically plastic. Something that they can grow into, and it's easy care, so that way you don't have to worry about them getting it dirty or wet or stinky, because you can just throw it in the washing machine with everything else. So I should take a second. I'm finally wearing my raga sweater, and it's really quite nice. It's nice and warm. I wearing it at the perfect time of year, I think, because it's not so cold that it's like freezing in the apartment without having the heat on. Really, it's like, it's an old building. It's a little drafty, and it's not cold enough for us to not be allowed to open our window. So when it does get a little hot in here, I can still let that warm in. So it's at that perfect temperature. It's really soft. It's nice. My only qualm with the sweater that I have, which is Raga by Violet McQuaid, for Spindrift yarn, the only problem I have with it is just it's just sizing stuff. So like I noticed like there's a little bit of excess fiber here, which had I like properly fitted this to myself before, like I didn't know I could do this, because like I've been doing a little bit of sewing and learning more about it, but I could have like sewn things a little bit tighter across this part of my chest, so that way I don't have like this gapping here. And then had I had the wherewithal to know that my body would change in the year, and tends to trend a little bit more rotund, I would have made it a little bit wider around the love handles, because it is hugging my love handles in a way that I'm not super flattered with. But anyway, overall, I really love it. This was made in Knit Picks palette in its Peruvian high woolen wool. Yeah. So I'm finally wearing my sweater that took me a year to make, and then 6 more months for me to wear it. Yeah. So I got a little bit of a life update and a shop update now, I guess. So for those of you who've been watching the podcast for a little while, you know that I got a knitting machine and I showed you the stuff that I was doing with it, mostly making like acrylic hats, because my plan was to take part in a couple of the like the crafting fairs that happen here on the island before Christmas, forgetting that you have to sign up for the bigger ones the year before, and for the biggest ones there is a waiting list still. So when I did do a little bit of searching to see if I could take part in some of them, they're already full up, so can't take part in any of them. So what I've decided to do is, instead of having these hats just like languish potentially away in my closet, and because I want to continue making more of these machine knit hats, I've opened an Etsy store. So the link is down in the description. It's just Fox and Oak Designs. You can find it there. And I have just been taking some pictures of some of the hats. At time of recording, I have about 30 of the hats that I have knit up, or machine knit up. And it's mostly the Easy Care hats. So I think only 2 or 3 of them are hand wash at this point. But I will be putting the more expensive fibered hats up here in the meantime, here over the next few weeks. Because of how Etsy works, if I uploaded everything all at once and then kind of just let it sit there, I wouldn't show up in the searches. So I have to like add them slowly. So I'm only adding 4, 5, 6 a day until I'm all caught up. And then once I'm caught up, then I'll continue making a few more hats. So most of what's on there is Easy Care. If you want to support the channel, if you want to support me while I'm going to school, because this is going to be some supplemental income while I'm working part-time while going back to school in January. So if you want to support me, please follow the link down in the description to the Etsy store, and you can get a quick peek of some of the reversible Easy Care hats that I've been making. If you're in Canada, shipping's free. If you're in the United States, if you buy over $35 US, which works out to be basically 2 hats, which is 2 hats, that's where the price points really sit. But if you spend more than $35 US in the store, you get free shipping as well. And then international customers, you can purchase them too, but shipping internationally is very expensive. I've done my best to find ways to make it as cheap as possible. So I will be vacuum sealing them and sending them out that way. So that way when I do ship, they are as cheap as possible for me to ship. But Canada Post is expensive. It's really expensive. So if you want to support me and the channel, and you want something to show for it other than just buying a subscription or whatever, please go down below, maybe buy a hat. I'd be forever grateful. So I do want to talk a little bit, because it's been a long time that we've had like a full podcast where like there's a story time and all of that. I've done like life updates and things like that, which, you know, I'll be doing that too. But I kind of feel like there hasn't been like the chit chatty sort of stuff that we built this channel on. And I mean, I understand that's hard to have that chit chat when you're by yourself now. I miss you, Simone. But I feel like maybe it's time for me to start talking more about certain things. So in the old fashioned, I'm going to actually work on something. So the thing that I wanted to actually talk about is maybe a more serious topic than is really necessary, but I want to talk a little bit about how my ADHD has been affecting my crafting, how it affects design work, and how I'm hoping to work around that here in the future by doing different things, especially since I'm going to be taking university level courses again here come January. And I don't know about you, but micro and macroeconomics doesn't sound like a page turner for me. And one of the things that I've been noticing more so lately, but as I think about it and reflect on how things were when I was a kid, it very much affected me then. So for quite some time, I've been struggling with reading. Not that I can't read, I can read. It's not a literacy problem. The thing that I've been struggling with is paying attention while reading. So I went to the library here and I picked up a book by Anthony Doerr, Cloud Cuckoo Land. So because I know that I'm going to be having to read and research stuff as I get back into doing school stuff, I know that I'm going to have to get better at staying on track. So one of the things that happens a lot when I'm reading is that something in the text will spark a thought train in my head, and my foreground brain is what I'll call it, follows that thought, and then my background brain continues reading. So what I mean by foreground and background, I don't know if anybody else is like this that watches, but for me, I consistently have at least 2 thought trains going on in my head at the same time. There's the one that is the one that like allows me to do things on autopilot. That's my background brain. So like while I'm making a pot of coffee, like I can do a lot of that on automatic, but because I'm not thinking about it, I make silly mistakes. And when I'm having a bad day, like an off day where I can't do that multitasking, I call them 14-step days. If you've watched the podcast way back in the day, Simone and I talked about 14-step days where, when you make a pot of coffee on a good day, it's 3 steps. On a bad day, it's 14. That's my background brain. That's what I'm like going around doing stuff. But the foreground brain is me thinking of something completely different. And it's partially the reason why, like when I walk through a door, I'll forget what I'm doing. In this case, and which this is what sparked me wanting to talk about it on the podcast here, is that in this book, there is a passage about how the quality of light changes from day to night, saying that something to the effect that the color of the light turns silver, right? And my background brain continued to read, but my foreground brain's like, oh, that's a really cool way of talking about the moon, saying that the light's going to be silver. Isn't it really cool that, the moon's refraction, how much light it's able to reflect is about the same as asphalt, and we still get that much light from the moon? Wow, we get so much light from the sun. I'm surprised that we don't. And then I caught myself and realized that I was still reading 3 or 4 paragraphs later. These are short paragraphs, not big paragraphs, but like, we'll say like 8 or 9 lines down, and I had not absorbed a word of it. Not a word of it. So I had to go back and read it. And like, I got frustrated because like, I remember as a kid, I used to read a lot and I would read stories, and what would happen is that like the world would fall away, and I would get really involved in the book, and like people would call my name and I wouldn't hear them because I'm so into the book. It's hyperfocus is what that was. Didn't realize it then. I realize that now. Hyperfocus is what that was. And what I'm trying to get myself into is being able to fall into the world of stuff again. So that way, when I'm doing this research, that I can try to like utilize all of that. So that way, when it comes time to taking tests, I do well on them, and don't have the problem of where I have to keep reading the same passage over and over and over and over and over again. So I've been working a little bit on that. So I think I picked a good book for this, because this book is written in like a point of view sort of thing. So if you're familiar with the Game of Thrones series, each chapter is a different point of view character. Very much the case here. And the first few chapters, some of the chapters are really, really short. Kind of like a Dan Brown novel. Makes you feel really smart for sitting down for 15 minutes and reading 4 chapters. But those 4 chapters are 4 pages long. Anyway, so that's making it easy for me to like stay interested, because like when my mind started to wander, because I was reading too much about a particular character and moved to the next chapter. That chapter ended, and I would move to another character. But totally by accident, this is working out for me. But like, I am finding it really hard to stay focused on these things. And I wanted to kind of talk about that when it comes to crafting, which I think is part of the reason why, like, long viewers of the podcast know that I've lost my mojo to knit for a little while. And then what happens is that I go and crochet for a little while, and then I get sick of crochet and then go back to knitting for a long period of time. And I think it's mostly due to like the ADHD. And it makes it so, like, having ADHD is kind of like a superpower with a big weakness, because the superpower is like, when you hyper focus, you're able to learn how to do things really, really quickly, and you retain a lot of information. And that's a really good, useful skill to have, right? The problem is that it's coupled with the inability to choose when you focus, right? So as a kid, like, because I would hyper focus on different things, Pokemon was a big thing as when I was a kid. That caused me to hyper focus on that. So you could ask me a lot of different questions about Pokemon 30 years later, and it's still up in this noggin. But you ask me when my next dentist appointment is. If I don't have 4 or 5 reminders on my phone telling me when that is, I'm not going to remember it. You ask me when my next hair appointment is, same thing. I was supposed to get my hair cut at the end of August. Totally flaked on it, and it was like the 5th time that I flaked on a hair appointment with my hairstylist. And now I've been too ashamed to go back and apologize for the 5th time. And I have not gotten my hair cut since. Which, I mean, works out because I've been wanting to grow it out again anyway. But it's one of those things that you kind of just feel really silly for forgetting really basic things. And then other times where, like, you just kind of like forget that time exists. And it's one of those traps where it's like, oh, I'll start doing something at 2:00. And then 2:04 rolls around. Like, oh, I guess I'll start it at 3. 3:04. Oh, I'll start it at 4, and so on and so forth. So this morning, I didn't expect this recording to take 2 hours at this point, which you guys are only going to be seeing like maybe 45 minutes of it, because a lot of it is just me bending over and picking up. I'm rambling. So getting back on topic. So like, having ADHD is really handy when you are interested in something, because you learn how to do something really quickly, and you learn how to do something like to a passable amount really quickly. But then when you have to focus on working on the harder things to really finesse it, it gets really, really difficult for at least for me to finesse things, right? It was a constant problem in my undergrad with music. I could play the music, like, after a week I could get through the entire piece, but like those little moments of like finesse that like really just to the piece, I would struggle with that for weeks. Anyway, so when it comes to like design, what I've been finding is that like I've been like hopscotching to different things. So like I'm working on hats for a little bit, and then I'm figuring out how to vacuum seal stuff, and then I'm working on this hat here, and then I'm popping on over to this because I'm sick of knitting, and it just kind of it can get a little frustrating because it feels like I feel like I'm doing a lot of work to get nothing done. So I hope that any of you who feel the same way know that you are not broken. People are out there having the same problems as you. And sometimes routine works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think the best thing that you can do for yourself, as I've truly been working on these past few weeks, as I have nothing to distract me from all of these feelings of inadequacy or whatever, is just to like really take time and be patient and be kind to yourself, because you're doing your best. And there are times where doing your best is all that you can do, and that's all that you can expect yourself to do. And if you need to give yourself time to relax and time to take a break, remember that if you are not enjoying yourself while you're taking that break, it's not actually a break. You're just anxious. To work on that. I know this is starting to feel a little preachy, so I'm gonna move on to the last little thing. So the last thing is update about music stuff. So we are getting close to Christmas, so I'm going to be in a few different Christmas shows this year. So of course, Luminos has the Mysterium show that is going to be playing in Summerside and in Charlottetown there in December on the 16th and 17th, I do believe. I'll correct myself down on the screen, and I'll put links down in the description to buy tickets if you are available. This program is like a candlelight carol Christmas song thing. We're going to be doing a bunch of different genres, like classical genres. We're not doing pop music or anything like that, but it's the type of music that you can like lean back, enjoy the ambiance of candlelight. We will literally have candles lighting the space at one point. And only candles, no overhead lights, just candles lighting the space at one point while we sing Silent Night, I think. That's what we did a previous year. It's in the program. I'm pretty sure that's what we're doing again this year. And it was really, really nice. So if you have time, if you're in the area, highly recommend it. Yeah, I'm also going to be doing another little show with a community choir here. I'm actually going to be playing the clarinet with the Charlottetown Legion Choir, which is... if you're not familiar with the Legion here in Canada, the Canadian Legion is a place where veterans and other community folks can get together and have some camaraderie. And depending on what group it is, they have a wide swath of different activities that they can do. I know the Montague Legion for a while didn't have anything to do with alcohol. The Charlottetown Legion is a bar. So it's a whole different thing. But this one, the Charlottetown Legion has a choir that has a number of community members and a couple of veterans, but a number of community members in it. And I've been asked to play in the pit orchestra sort of thing. There's five wind players that are just getting together, I think a percussionist, and we're just doing some Christmas music. So if you want something that's a little bit less heavy, less heavy Christmas music, that's a little bit more pokey and fun. Not that Luminos isn't pokey and fun, but it's heavier music for sure. If you want something that's a little bit lighter on the palate, then we're doing shows on December 3rd and December 10th. But I do want to talk quickly about a Phantom of the Opera, because I don't think I actually got to talk about Phantom of the Opera other than saying, oh, we're doing it. So the shows all went really well. We didn't have any major muck-ups like we did the last time we did it, which for new viewers, we did the Phantom of the Opera show. This is not Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical, The Phantom of the Opera. This is the 1920s movie, Phantom of the Opera, set to music, and we provided the music. So kind of like a player piano back in the 1920s for silent movies. This is a silent movie. We were the player piano, except it was a choir and orchestra. Really cool show, really campy, really fun. And the first time that we did it there a couple years ago, there's been some debate on what actually happened, but what the cause was is in debate. But what happened is that the person who was playing the movie behind us, their computer stopped working. Some people said it just went to sleep because he didn't set it up to not go to sleep after an hour and a half, after 90 minutes. Or some people said that it Windows update happened and forced the computer to restart. But what happened is that, close to the climax of the film, it stopped playing. We just got the blue screen that you see, like when you plug in your VCR and you're on your TV and there's nothing playing. It's just that plain blue screen. That's what we got. So we had to stop. And then Margot, knowing the work so much, that she was able to tell the guy to, gave them a timestamp, and then we were able to come in and finish the show. That didn't happen this time. This time the show went off really, really well. And we hit all of the marks that we needed to hit to make it work. We hit them. And it was just a lot of fun. It was really cool. We played, I sang, the orchestra played. You can tell I'm an instrumentalist. We performed there at the Celtic, the Performing Arts Center at the Celtic College of Piping Performing Arts Center. That's all the words I'm supposed to be putting together. And they have a really, really really impressive auditorium for small shows like that. So this show, and it's state of the art. So typically what we had done is in a smaller, we had just like a regular like projector just projecting on the screen behind us. So some of our taller members, if their head got ahead of that projection, it would project onto their forehead, and then they would actually cover part of the screen, which is what happened the first time. One of our tenors, Justin, he's very, very tall. I think he's like 6'5". When he was sitting down, he had to like stoop so that way he wasn't on the screen. Anyway, tangents, geez. So we did at the College of Piping's Performing Arts Center, and they have it set up that they can do a rear, like a rear projection. So it's like a true like silver screen experience. Really fun. The acoustics in there, a little bit dry for just a choir, but since it was a choir and orchestra, I think it worked. And that show actually had like a true concession stand sort of dealy for like a movie. So like when we went in, because we knew that there were going to be concessions and stuff, like they're going to be selling beer and things like that, but we did not know until we went out on stage and can smell it, they were serving popcorn. So it was really cool to like come in, smell popcorn, and then you're getting ready to perform this movie. So me and one of my other colleagues in the choir, Kara, we don't get to interact very much in choir because the rehearsal space that we have, like we sit as far as possible as we possibly can. Not because we don't like each other, because we do greatly enjoy each other's company, and we have a similar vulgar personality and sense of humor. We don't really get to interact that way because, you know, we get there, choir starts, and then by the end of the choir, like we're all tired, so we just like say hello, that sort of thing, and then we go home. But because of how we were sitting for the show, Kara and I were sitting together. And because we have that kind of personalities that like mesh well, and we kind of just like we gossip, and it's a lot of fun. Anyway, part of the Phantom show is that there are scenes in it where the singers on stage have to pretend like we are audience members on the screen. So there's a couple like ad-lib spots where we actually are like talking to each other, like the choir members are talking to each other to make it sound like there's an audience being played on the screen. And previously, when I was just sitting with the rest of the tenors, and the way that I sit is that I sit between the baritones and the tenors. Oddly, I sit between baritones and the second tenors. Anyway, so I'll just comment to the paritones or the one tenor that's sitting next to me, because we're sitting in rows of two. Just different things, and it's always been like, oh, I can't believe that we get to see Carlotta, which is a character in the show. And like that kind of thing that like an audience member would actually say. But when Kara and I sat together, we just started gossiping about different things. Like not so loud that like people could pick us out of the crowd, but like we were gossiping. It was fun. So like there was one mention of like the rear projected screen. I can't remember his name. The stage manager that was like managing us told us to not walk behind the screen because there's a lot of like cords and stuff attached to very expensive equipment. So if you need to go out on stage, even if you're on the far side, you are to go out on the main stage and go walk across and not walk behind this, because you don't want to affect the equipment. So me and Kara started gossiping about which one of the tenors, because we're the dumb ones, which one of the tenors is going to be the one that's going to go behind there and then trip over it and just rip everything down. Just like, I don't want to go too far into what other things we gossip about, because then you will think less of us as people, because we were gossipy little bitches at that point. But it was a great show. We are definitely going to be doing it again in the future. But I do believe that we might be interspersing that with Nosferatu, because the composer who wrote the music for this silent movie, I've mentioned this before, is written on Nosferatu, so we might be looking at that in the future. Margot has also, to my knowledge, recorded all of our performances, the 3 performances that we did. So which one she likes best, I think in like future years, she's going to be making that available to watch. I don't know if it's going to be pay-per-view. I don't know if it's just going to be on YouTube. But when that becomes available for all of you who are unable to come to the island to see us perform, I will make sure that I mention that here on the podcast, so that way you can watch it, because it's a really fun show. I'm sure that there's like copyright stuff that we have to worry about. Although it's a 1920 movie, I don't know. It's probably in the public domain. It's been over 100 years. That's not stuff for me to worry about. That's stuff for Margot to worry about. Anyway, so I think I've rambled enough, and I'm interested to see how much of this actually makes the podcast. Yeah, so Jess and I, my roommate Jess, have been saying for the last few episodes, I really need to come up with another tagline there at the end to be like, if you think I'm the worsted, because of the old name of the podcast. And I haven't come up with anything yet. I really don't know how to end the podcasts and do ratings anymore. So I'm going to rate this podcast a 97 out of 90 tangents. But if you have any suggestions of what the new tagline for me asking for ratings are, comment down below and let me know what you think. If you follow the Instagram, great. If you don't, links down below. You get sneak peeks for the channel, as well as I think I'm going to be a little bit less, like, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to be a little bit less like curated on the Instagram, because part of what I was doing is, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more, I'm going to be a little bit less curated on the Instagram, which sounds weird because I haven't really been posting a lot this past couple of weeks. But that's because I haven't had anything that's strictly this channel to post about, because it's just been more of the same of what I've been doing. So I think I'm just going to, do a little bit more fun stuff on the Instagram. Follow me there. And I'm going to be a little bit more active on Ravelry, not just on not just on my message board that I have for the channel here, but as a whole, I've got the time. I might as well. And you might see me on a little bit more on, well, I mean, I'm on Reddit all the time, but just not under this name. You might see me on Reddit under this name in the knitting and crochet subreddits and the bros who crochet subreddit. Just making comments about helpful comments. I'm not going to troll anybody. As much as I love to troll people, I would like to continue making this a fun and accepting hobby for everyone. So that way you can do everything from a $200 sweater like what I'm wearing, or a $3 square of acrylic yarn, and include everybody and make them have fun. Or not make them have fun, let them have fun. Another tangent. Thank you for watching, and I will be back sooner than I will be back sooner than later with another video. Bye, guys. I've just been working the balls and the I was hoping to find All the Light That We Cannot See, because that's the book that he wrote that won a Pulitzer Prize. And to get back into reading, I wanted to read something that I used to have a lot of interest in, which was when I was a kid, I would like eat up all of the fiction that was based around World War II and concentration camps, but assuming it was the characters in the concentration camps. But of course, that was all children's books. So I wanted to find something that was more adult and perhaps more accurate. So I did a Google search and found Anthony Doerr's, but went to the library here in Charlottetown. They didn't have the book. They had this one. So I decided to pick this one up. And that was a lot of preamble. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Knit Nights at Joanne's hasn't inspired me to get back into this kind of drama, because I think the joke is at this point that every time that we have Knit Night, we talk about World War II, specifically the German side. But I don't want to say that word because I don't want to get demonetized. If I even get monetized anymore. Do I get monetized? I should probably look into that. I've never received a paycheck from YouTube. Anyway, so look at me getting sidetracked on a conversation about ADHD. So anyway,